Hey everyone, welcome to the Open Table podcast. My name is Reverend Brandan Robertson, and I'm a progressive Christian pastor, author, and theologian. Each week, I'll be uploading my reflections on the Bible from a progressive, inclusive Christian perspective, in hopes that it will equip and inspire you on your own journey of faith. And if you'd like to go deeper, I want to invite you over to join my Patreon community. Patreon is a community of progressive, inclusive Christians from all around the world, and we get together each week on Zoom calls and on discussion boards and get to really build a community around this journey towards reconstructing our faith. So if you'd like to go deeper into any of the concepts you're hearing in these sermons, come on over to my Patreon and join us. The link is in the show notes. With all of that said, I'm so glad you're here today. Let's listen in to today's sermon. So as we stand on the brink of a new year together, it seems to me more important now than ever to remind us of what it means to root ourselves in following Jesus. For so many, this is a time of reflection on the past year, a time for resolution and intention setting as we look to a new year. And as those who have committed ourselves to being disciples of Jesus, those committed to being a community of like-minded believers seeking to grow in faith with each other, our chief resolution for this year should be to become more like Jesus. But how? So many Christians in our world today claim to be followers of Christ. But if you look at the witness of Christians in the world and ask the general public what they think of Christians, you'll hear phrases like hypocritical, self-righteous. You'll hear more people talking like that than about Christians who sound and look like the Savior they claim to worship. I think part of the reason for this is that so many Christians have chosen, as I've said before, to be fans of Jesus rather than to be followers of Jesus. We like the idea of thinking about an ancient man who roamed around Israel saying frilly, feel-good statements, rather than to believe that we are called to actually do what Jesus said, to change our lives, to become like Jesus. As we enter the new year as a community, we're going to be taking a little bit of a break from our regular practice of using the lectionary to guide our sermon times. And instead, for the beginning portion of this year, we're going to walk through one of the most practical, straightforward, clear books of the New Testament that describes what it actually looks like to follow Jesus in our day-to-day lives. The book of James. Now, I'll lay my cards on the table. James is my favorite book of the Bible for many reasons. First, because my middle name is James, and that has predisposed me to like this book. Secondly, you might know James is the brother of Jesus. And this book was written by the community that James himself pastored and reflects the most practical advice on how to be a Christian from the man who literally grew up with Jesus. While many of the other New Testament books spend a lot of time explaining the story of Jesus and developing a theology about Jesus, James simply describes what it looks like to follow Jesus. And again, in this moment of our history, in this coming year of 2025, it seems radically important that each one of us who claims to be a disciple of Christ takes time to recalibrate and recommit ourselves to being Christ-like in a world where doing so has fallen out of fashion. So each week, through the end of March, we're going to walk through the major sections of the book of James and examine exactly what James teaches about how to be Christian in our modern world. And I would encourage you to not just limit your reflection on the book of James to our times together on Sunday, but find time in your week to read and reflect on the book of James that we're going to be spending time thinking about in our worship service. There's going to be a Bible study reading plan on the back table that lists the texts I'm going to be preaching on each week through the end of March. And I want to encourage you to take one and then to find time in the week before the service to read and reflect on that text yourself. This way, we can be in lockstep as we seek to study the book of James together and grow more into the image of Christ together. So today we're beginning at the very beginning of the book of James. We have one of my favorite teachings of the entire book, of how practical and helpful it is for reframing how we think about our lives when we face hard times. When I was a teenager, I experienced a lot of hard times. There were some very dark moments for my mental health. Our family was not well off, and I found myself riddled with anxiety and depression and even suicidal ideation. Now, there are lots of reasons for mental health challenges. Not all of them are really within our control as humans. That's why therapy and medication are really helpful tools that we have to help us get to a mentally healthy place. But sometimes it is the challenges we face in life that really knocks us down and makes us feel completely helpless and hopeless and vulnerable. And it was in one of these dark seasons that I remember opening up to this passage from the book of James. And the words of the apostle were like a healing balm to my soul. They really helped me think about my hardships through a new way. They gave me an unexpected strength. In the beginning of this book, James writes, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." James is writing to a community that had a lot of trials. Many in James's community were very poor and very sick. You'll hear more about them later in the letter as we study it together. Many had been rejected from their families and their communities because they decided to become a part of Jesus' movement. Many were facing regular persecution from the Roman Empire because of their newfound faith and their identity as non-Roman people. In short, these were people who were well acquainted with trials and tribulations and grief. And the first thing James says to them in this epistle right off the bat is, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kind. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kind. Talk about a reframing of the situation. On the surface, this statement is so bold that it can even seem callous or out of touch, can't it? Imagine walking up to someone in the midst of deep trouble and saying, "Be joyful that you're in this." They might have some choice words for you if you said that. But this is indeed what James says to his community and to us. He says, in the midst of our trials, consider, or in Greek, the word literally means to think about it as an opportunity for joy. James is encouraging a shift of mindset, a shift in perspective, because our mindset really does matter. When you're in a bad situation, the worst thing you can do is to wallow in pity and grief. To be sure, there is a time for grief. There is an appropriate time to feel bad for yourself and for others. But so often we get caught in a mindset that makes us view everything as bad. Everything is against us. Everything is a struggle. And this becomes the way we see ourselves and the world around us. And we get stuck. As Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Think about that. A man who was imprisoned, beaten, tortured, and watched most of his friends and family be brutally executed came out on the other side and said, "Attitude is what matters in any set of circumstances." My favorite author, Albert Camus, wrote a reflection on the Greek myth of Sisyphus, a story about a man who was punished by the gods, and his punishment was to endlessly roll a stone up a hill for the rest of eternity. And every time the stone got to the top of the hill, he had to watch it roll back down, and Sisyphus began the journey again. This is a great metaphor for what happens when we adopt a mindset or identity of suffering, of victimhood. We can get caught in the never-ending loop of believing that the world is against us, and that will increase our suffering needlessly. But Camus challenges this story in a profound way. He writes, "The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy." Camus simply injects into this story a sense of purpose. Though Sisyphus cannot escape his fate, he imagines that he begins to find a sort of satisfaction and fulfillment in the fate of rolling the stone up a hill time and time again. And the struggle to do so becomes a sense of joy, a source of joy for Sisyphus. It becomes motivation. It becomes something worthwhile. And when Sisyphus changes his attitude and focuses in on the present moment, something remarkable happens. Camus says he finds himself happy. The same can be true when we face trials in life. There is not always a good reason for our suffering. There's not always a rational explanation for why we're going through what we're going through. Life is not fair. But in every circumstance, we do have a choice. We can choose to be defeated. We can choose to feel like victims of the world and that God is against us. We can choose to feel like everything is meaningless. Or we can choose to find joy. Choose to recognize that our circumstances do not define us. Choose to believe that whatever we're going through will pass. Choose to acknowledge that there is something for us to learn in whatever situation we might find ourselves in. We can choose to have joy when we go through trials. And why? James continues, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance have its work in you so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. Because the tests, the trials, the hardships is what produces perseverance within us. And what does that mean? Quite simply that anything and everything that God allows for us to go through is an opportunity for us to grow stronger, an opportunity for us to gain wisdom, an opportunity for us to be refined. My childhood preacher used to define perseverance as stick-to-itiveness, the ability to stick to it, to press forward, to keep moving, to keep growing. When you face a hardship, it's important to keep your eyes forward, keep taking the next right step, keep realizing that you will persevere if you keep the right attitude and have faith that God will not abandon you to suffering. When you keep a mindset of joy, which, by the way, is different from being happy, but is instead a mindset of hope and expectancy, then you'll be able to move through whatever trial you face with haste. You will learn the lessons that are there available for you, and you will be made stronger, even in the worst circumstances. As that prophetess Kelly Clarkson says, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. James says that you will be made mature and complete if you keep joy in the midst of your trials. You will gain wisdom and insight. You will be strengthened. You will learn deep truths about yourself and about others around you. So, as we stand on the precipice of this new year together, let's enter with clear eyes. You're going to face some trials this year, friends. You're going to go through periods of hardship. Unexpected things will happen. But instead of viewing these things as God's judgment against you, or bad luck that you always seem to bring, or some sort of punishment, what if you tried to adopt a mindset of joy, a mindset of hope, a mindset that's rooted in the truth that we just celebrated this Christmas, that God is with us, and that you will come out on the other side of this trial, whatever it might be, stronger, wiser, more complete, and more mature. This is the mindset that James encourages his community to adopt as they face trials and judgment. And through the things and the times that they faced that were dark and painful, he was vindicated and his community was vindicated in the end. They did grow and become stronger. They did experience a sense of joy. Again, we'll read more about this in the later parts of this letter. And if you keep the mindset of joy in the trials you face, you will grow stronger and find joy and be made a greater and more whole person too. Because God is with you. God is fighting your battles for you. And you've always made it through every other trial you've faced. So shift your perspective. Trust that each situation is intended to strengthen you, to teach you, and to refine you. And watch how your experience of life can change in this new year. So to conclude today's message, I want to read James' wisdom for us once more. And I just want you to listen closely and let the words sink in. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance finish its work in you, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. May this be our mindset as we step into the new year together this week. Amen.